Farmers and residents along the Rio Grande River are bracing for another long, hot, dry summer. Last year, reservoir levels dropped to record lows, and this year it is expected to be even worse. Mexico had to dip into its depleted reservoirs after U.S. President Donald Trump enforced an 80-year-old water treaty. Let's talk more about this. And joining us now to talk about water conditions in Mexico and really in Latin America as a whole, Lucas Berti. He is a Latin America reporter at the Brazilian Report. Lucas, thanks very much for taking time to chat. We appreciate it.
Hello, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Okay, where to begin? I mean, because Latin America right now is facing such a water shortage, really crisis level in so many areas. I want to talk about Mexico, the current state of Mexico's water supply, an issue so pressing it was really one of the key topics in the most recent presidential election. We just outlined some very grim numbers.
Well, yes, of course, because Mexico has been experiencing a long-lasting drought. It's related mostly to climate change. But now we see that it also has some social political components. And as we know, climate change modify rainfall patterns, drive temperatures up, and it's alarming in a country that it's already warm and dry, such as Mexico, because now the country, as Latin America as a whole, is facing a spiral of extreme weather events.
So the water crisis in the region, it's obviously impacting farmers and the agricultural production in the area. What is it going to mean to crops and Mexico's economy? And the United States certainly is not making the situation any better. How are Trump's actions adversely affecting this ongoing situation?
Well, in terms of geopolitics and economics, we say that when we have tension between countries, things don't get easier. And in the case of Mexico and the U.S., after the inauguration of President Trump in January, things got tense between the government of Trump and government of President Claudia Sheinbaum. And now we have the water crisis in the middle of it, aside from the tax war that started in the beginning of the year. And the thing is, at the center of that discussion, we have the 1944 water treaty. But as experts and residents have been alerting, the treaty signed more than half a century ago was signed in the moment in which climate change was not an issue. And now we have climate change. So the Mexico's necessity of giving the water to the U.S., which is establishing the treaty, is twice as challenging because of that, because Mexico doesn't have water to supply to its own consumers.
So certainly climate change isn't something that snuck up on people. It has been going on now for a generation. So how did the situation get this bad? And I guess people are wondering what realistically can be done at this point.
Well, that's $1 billion question, because it's a problem in almost every country in Latin America. We have an alteration of rainfall patterns from Mexico to Uruguay when you pick the whole map of Latin America. What we have now is there are some attempts of mitigation to this climate impacts. But for instance, when you have like big industry, big companies that require a big amount of water for their supply chain, it's a question that doesn't adds up. So, for instance, when you're considering a country like Mexico, which is already dry, it's already warm, the problem gets bigger. And for instance, the corn crops are affected, but also the beef market, the industrial market. So we have like a whole structural problem that is like extremely related to the water crisis. So one of the first steps to address the situation would be to have the governments of Mexico and the US to make amends and to try to find a common ground to solve the problem, because the problem is not just a Mexican problem, right. It's a regional problem.
You know, and I think you talked about, you know, it's like the first domino fell and now they're all going. So talk about the implications that this is having as a crisis for food security in Mexico and globally.
There's a very alarming data that I've checked. It's sad because every time I check the updates, there are new Mexican states in the most affected list, and there's a data from late April which says that almost 600 cities in Mexico are already enduring some level of drought. That's according to CONAGUA as well, the official agency. So it's related to the food insecurity, but also we can have in the near future a problem that will affect not just food insecurity, but also um, it will damage the economical structure of Mexico as a whole, with large industries having a huge problem to supply their demand. So when you have like a big scale of crisis, you start from having problems with the crops, having problems to supply water to animals in the farms, but also a whole big structural problem that needs to be solved and needs both countries, the government of Mexico and US, to find a common ground.
Okay, let's expand this just a bit. Bigger picture. So much of Latin America is suffering. Panama Canal had such a low water level, it restricted trade. Ships able to go up and down. Manaus, in the heart of Amazon, also historically low water. Glaciers melting in the Andes. Tens of millions of people in Latin America are right now at risk.
Yes, for sure. We also had in Brazil last year a big climate-related crisis in the southern part of Brazil, which killed a lot of people. So when we have countries struggling to find a solution, we need regional cooperation more than ever, because aside from the ideological differences, nations and decision makers have to sit together and discuss this crisis as it is, as a regional crisis.